everything should be starting up. Hopefully it will actually appear live here. Let's see. Okay, I see us. Should be good. All right. Okay. Are you ready, Ron?
Ready.
Ready. All right. Let's go. Find my notes again. Welcome to episode 36 of the TCCG Roundtable. We're your hosts, dragonrider and RonMexico. How's it going?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. I can't believe it's Friday already. Where has this week gone?
Yep, every Friday. It's like,
I know.
happened again.
Yeah. I'm like, shouldn't it just be like Tuesday or Wednesday? I don't know. This week has felt like it just like flew by. So I don't know what happened to the week. I don't know what I did.
Complain.
But...
Weekends here.
That's right. Yes. Indeed. Which, you know, is good. And hopefully we're going to have some relaxing weekends or game-filled weekends. I don't know. Some of both, maybe. But what do you have going on this weekend, Ron? Anything going on?
Well, hoping that I don't lose power again this weekend would be nice. You know, there's a big storm that rolled in last night, knocked out my stream when I was like, I don't know, 10 minutes in. Which is a little sad that I was out of power for a good little while. But everything's fine now. You know, it's kind of a mess outside, but no major damage, nobody hurt as far as I know. So that's all good. And just hoping to get back on track, you know, with normal plans. Streaming again today. Got my stream for next week lined up and ready. And actually, I have a birthday coming up in a couple of days. So that's kind of nice. We're going to do a little something special. And then, yeah, just, I mean, as long as power holds for my birthday, I'm happy. You know, that's all I need.
Yes, yes. Hopefully the power doesn't go out again. That absolutely. And happy birthday. I know it's still a couple days, but you know,
Thank you.
I'm going to say it here on the show and in chat as well. Thank you. Yes. Happy birthday, Ron. We are happy to have you be celebrating a birthday with you on the show.
And what about you, Don? What do you got going on?
I don't know, really. I think probably going to be doing some cleaning. I've been working on some videos and some ideas. I'm already thinking about some fun things for like October, Halloween stuff. So I'm already trying to plan some things that I can record and get put out, you know, early October, because that is coming up. So hopefully I can get some of that stuff worked on in the next couple of weeks. And other than that, just playing a bunch of card games and, you know, seeing what I can figure out in terms of cards and learn new games and get info on stuff and
living the life.
I don't know. Yeah. We'll see. It's I am realizing though, as I play some of these games, I'm like, especially when I'm trying to teach other people. So I was trying to like teach my mom. My mom and I were playing some Lorcana last night. And I start to like tell her the different words, right? Exerting and we're challenging or questing and all this. And it's just like, got to the point I was like, it's tap, just tap. Because like she knows magic. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like just it's tapping or you're attacking. So, you know, it's kind of funny just looking at like all of the, you know, the different terminology across the different games. And it's like, okay, all these games trying to use different terms, you know, and it's just like, okay,
they got to stand out,
this.
You know,
yeah,
they can't
stand out.
They can't just use someone else's game words.
Right. Yes. And we've talked about this, but like, Disney, right? They can't you can't say that something died or went to the
Oh
graveyard.
no,
No, it's
exile,
banished. Yeah,
banish. That's what it
banished.
is.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, can't say that it died. No, it's banished. You gotta say it right. So it's exactly in chat. Yeah, DW say it's ink, not mana. That's right. It's not land. It's not mana. It's ink in your
There you go.
inkwell. You gotta,
There you go.
you gotta
Different.
be correct there. So yeah, that's just something that like I've realized, and just reading a bunch of different like game rules and mechanics and trying to work on content. It's like I gotta make sure I get all these words right, especially if I'm working on stuff that's like trying to teach a game. I can't say the thing wrong. I can't say it incorrectly. I maybe can make the comparison so that people understand, but I gotta use the right terminology. So that's been something that I've realized more recently. It's like, okay, I gotta focus on that so that I don't say things wrong. Yeah, but it's good. It's good. We also do have I know we've been talking about this, but we are participating in a SolForge Fusion digitized charity event that's being run
True.
by Casey Kidd, who was our guest back in the end of May. And it's in the auction part, so it's kind of interesting, right? We're all kind of putting in our like bids during this auction part of this event to kind of pick our draft order. There's 8 teams, and then we'll get to in that order, whoever bids the highest will get to pick their deck first that they get to use. But all of the proceeds are going to the National Alliance on Mental Illness nonprofit organization. So, it doesn't feel bad to bid a little bit more. It's like, all right, well, this is going to charity. So, we'll definitely be keeping everybody up to date. We'll have our first match coming up next week, and then we'll have, I think it's 3 weeks worth of matches all throughout September. So we're getting prepped for that. It's exciting.
I'm ready to digitize. We're gonna be
That's right.
jamming those digitizes. It's part of the rules that we have to whenever we see it. And immediately are required to play it, even if it will not help us and will only help our opponent. So it's a very fun little like wrinkle added to the concept of the game, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's right. Yes, I am totally ready to buff my opponent's creatures on the board. Let's go.
Oh, it's gonna be good.
Totally ready. But yes, there is a GoFundMe if anybody outside of the event does want to add to that. There is that link. So we'll definitely have that available at the beginning of every week after matches are posted. People can put bounties on players or teams. So absolutely welcome to put a bounty on us. Totally, if you if you want. I'm not sure that it's going to be very difficult for our opponents to take us down, but hey, that's it's more money for charity, right? So we're excited to be doing that. We'll keep everybody updated on how those games are going, and maybe even be able to showcase some of those games or chat with our opponents or something on the show. So that'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's what we have going on. What is our term of the week for this week, Ron? What do we got?
So this week, not an actual keyword or anything like we've discussed in previous weeks, but kind of just a way to characterize a deck. This week, our term of the week is solitaire, or like a solitaire type deck that people would kind of casually refer to something as. And essentially just what it means is a deck that is trying to just play its own set game plan, set win condition that is sort of without interaction from opponents. So a lot of people will derisively refer to it as a solitaire deck, or this person is playing solitaire basically, because why would you be playing this two-person or multiplayer game when all you want to do is just play this game by yourself, assemble your combination of cards, play them in order, and win the game without the opponent being able to stop it. It's one of the many strategies that can be very viable in games. Often it's like referred to with an abbreviation of OTK for one turn kill. And it can be something that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I know I personally don't love facing decks that I can't really do anything to stop once they have all of the things. Oh, look, they have all the things now. The game's over. They play them and win. So like I've been known to refer to something as a solitaire deck and like roll my eyes in annoyance. But it's something that's out there in card games, and it is still occasionally something that will create a healthy meta for the game, because there are other decks maybe that this can counter, that crowd out different decks that maybe you may actually enjoy or otherwise, kind of creates that whole like ecosphere of things. But an intriguing little name for a strategy.
Yes. And I don't really know when this term kind of started getting used. I feel like it's been around for a little while at this point, but I don't feel like I heard people kind of referring to that up until maybe like the last couple of years. So it's really kind of started, up more recently, I would say. Some of the terms we've talked about kind of sparked from, early Magic cards, right? From like 25 years ago or something like that. But I feel like the term and the way that people are using solitaire or solitaire deck has kind of been one of those more recent kind of terminologies. Right. So
I haven't ever heard anyone refer to a deck as a solitaire deck and mean it as a compliment. It has not been an affectionate term.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's just like it's one of those things where you are playing a different kind of game than your opponent is playing a lot of times. If you're not playing the same deck, then your concept, and I'll use Hearthstone as an example because I always go to Hearthstone. Your concept of what Hearthstone is as a game is fundamentally different from the game that your opponent is playing if you run into one of those so-called solitaire decks.
Yeah. It's something that I think we're going to kind of discuss a little bit more in our roundtable topic, our main topic for today. But yeah, it's been an interesting term. We'll put it that way. Interesting term to see getting used. So thank you for that, Ron.
Absolutely.
And I think it's time to get into some news. Are we ready for news?
Let's do it.
All right. General news. I mentioned this previously, but the Star Wars Unlimited by Fantasy Flight Games was announced earlier this year in May. It was demoed at GenCon, and I believe they're also doing some demo stuff at Spiel. I don't remember when that is, if that's happened already or not, but that is like a gaming event in Germany. But that Star Wars Unlimited will be releasing sometime next year in 2024. So definitely kind of looking forward to that, and just wanted to mention that again because in our roundtable topic, we're going to dive into that a little bit as well and kind of mention that. In some less exciting news, we have some news that Sheldon Menery, who is a very well-known judge, he's he was a judge, a Hall of Fame judge, and known as kind of the pioneer, kind of like the father of the Commander format, has just passed away. He was battling cancer and had been fighting with that for a while, but he did pass away. So if you see some news on that, or you see people kind of talking about Sheldon or Sheldon Menery, then that's who it is. So you kind of at least have a little bit of a frame if you are unfamiliar with who he is. But definitely seemed like an absolute amazing figure in the community. Was very like welcoming to a lot of people. Talked about Commander really being like a social aspect of the game and being something that everyone was welcome to and could be a part of. So definitely hope that more and more people kind of continue that legacy, not only in Magic, but I would say just across all of the card games, of really kind of helping create, places for everyone to feel welcome and involved in card games. For Flesh and Blood, the next expansion, Bright Lights, has already been announced. It's been a little while now, but that 251 card set kind of has like a cyberpunk, robotic type look to it. Preview season is coming very, very soon now. It's starting on September 22nd. The pre-release events will be running from September 29th through October 2nd, and then the set will fully release on October 6th. We also did just have the Wilds of Eldraine expansion released for Magic. That just came out, I believe, on the 5th for the MTGA, like the MTG Arena, online version. And then today, as of Friday, September 8th, that should be, in stores and be on for tabletop. So that should be released. For Eternal, the next set has already been on its way. I think we are starting to get a little bit now. I think they released one card today. We're starting to see a little bit of those cards be previewed for Battle Lines that's coming in the fall. It's going to contain over 200 cards and a few new mechanics. SolForge Fusion is working on set 3 called The Last Winter. They have been doing a handful of reveals every single week through different creators and through the official stream, showcasing not only a new card every time that they stream, but also the digital version of the game that is being worked on. And DC Dual Force has been in early access now for a week and a half-ish, since August 30th. They added in the daily and weekly quests, and they're working on things like ranked ladder play, daily logins, the subscription service where you'll be able to get the like solo content, weekly comics, and monthly mini sets, all of that, and working on kind of getting everything put out for early access into the Steam and Epic Store clients. So that is definitely been underway. And I'm sure there's even more things coming out, but that is kind of what we have going on this week. And what do we have, Ron, for organized play?
Well, for organized play, we have Lorcana events that have already started up, some 1K and 2K OP tour events. I don't have a whole lot more details to share just yet, but stay tuned for more Lorcana news. I'm sure there will continue to be lots of little local events and otherwise, and hopefully like some bigger, more organized events in the near future. For Battle Spirits Saga, we have grand open events in November with a grand total of $25,000 in cash prizes and Pro Tour invites on the line. For Magic, there's MagicCon Las Vegas that's coming up September 22nd through the 24th. It's going to host the Pinnacle Premier level play event of the 22-23 season and Magic World Championship XXIX, as well as their new 100K limited open. For Yu-Gi-Oh! YCS Vancouver, BC is happening this weekend, tomorrow soon. It's happening September 9th and 10th, and excited to hear the results for what happens there. And for Legends of Runeterra, we have the third World Championship information and a bit of information about the mystery event that has been revealed. The World Championship is going to be happening December 14th through the 16th with 64 players competing, $157,000 in monetary prizing, in addition to in-game badges, titles, card backs, icons, and the top 2 players will be the first Architects of Legends, having a lasting impact on the game by being able to work directly with the devs to create their own follower card for first place and spell card for second place. A final last chance qualifier will run November 25th through 26th for 2 spots that lead directly to the World Championship in December. And qualifiers from previous Runeterra Opens, non-Worlds qualifiers from each region, and some creators will be invited to a special event in the early part of 2024 at the Riot Campus in LAX to get a sneak peek at some of the things planned for 2024. Lots of exciting things there. I will be perpetually jealous of this Runeterra news as a Hearthstone player, but who knows? Maybe someday it'll change.
I know, even just that getting to go to, like an in-person, like kind of secret meeting and getting to see some of that stuff like ahead of time and actually get to like meet in person with just a bunch of other people who are creators or who are, like competitors, like that on its own to me sounds so cool. I know that in the past, even as you mentioned for Hearthstone, that Hearthstone's done a couple of those as well, right? Like creator summits or something like that. They had like one or two
Yeah.
Of those. And I'm like, man, that sounds so cool. So to be able to like compete in a tournament, and kind of win that as a prize is pretty sweet. That sounds awesome.
I mean, there is still like a cool thing that Hearthstone does for world champions where like they'll get essentially their own card in the game. And the card is often just like some kind of play on their screen name that they use or something like that. So it's how we've gotten Fiery Bat for Firebat, as the first world champion, or Ace Hunter Kreen for Hunter Ace. There's multiple other examples throughout just the history of Hearthstone. So that is a cool thing that Hearthstone does, but we're getting a little bit overshadowed by by some of the cool stuff Runeterra is doing right now.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. This is cool. Maybe we'll have to try some more Legends of Runeterra and see if we can sneak in something,
Maybe it's time.
All right. Well, I think it is time, Ron, to get into our roundtable topic for this week. And I know you and I kind of had a brief discussion about this, like before we started recording. But I kind of want to preface or kind of explain, I guess, what our topic is for this week, and then we can kind of dive into it. And this is the kind of idea, I guess, the difference in some of the games, some of the card games versus other card games, and kind of the mechanic of targeting or attacking and how that interaction changes strategies, changes mechanics of the game, or impacts mechanics. And basically what I mean by this is, for example, Hearthstone or even Disney Lorcana. And then also talking about that Star Wars Unlimited game, right? If you look at the rules, in those games, you basically have the choice when you are attacking, or in Disney Lorcana's case, right? If you're questing to get lore, you kind of have the option of where you want to send your attack or how you want to maneuver that, right? In Hearthstone, you can say, oh, this minion is going to attack into their minion, or I'm going to send my minion to their face and deal damage to their face. Same thing in the rule book for the Star Wars Unlimited. You'll be able to attack something that's like on the board, or you can attack their base directly, kind of like attacking face in Hearthstone.
Always go face.
That's right. Always face. But other card games like Magic, even like Eternal, I believe Eternal, Legends of Runeterra that we were just talking about, right? You kind of just say, these things that I have on the board are attacking just in general. And then your opponent has the option to defend and pick which of their things is going to block your things. So it's very different. And that definitely impacts how you play the game, right? You know, sometimes you're like, ooh, okay, in Hearthstone, if you have a bunch of little like 1/1s, you could just send them all face if you want, right? But if you did that in something like Magic or Legends of Runeterra, you're like, hey, I'm going to have all these little things just attack, and your opponent has 2/2 or 3/3 things on the board. They're just going to block and kill all your stuff, and that's it. So might not be the greatest strategy to just send all those in for an attack in Magic or Runeterra. So it definitely changes how you play the game. It changes just the overall like strategies. And I think it actually impacts decks, deck archetypes, like deck building. It impacts mechanics of the game. And also in things like Magic, one thing that you and I had talked about was the fact that Magic, you can interact with your opponent on their turn, right? Like you can play a counter spell, or you can play an instant, or you can play something during their turn. But a lot of these other games, you can't interact on your opponent's turn. So that also kind of adds to the differing strategies and the differing like strategy in game versus deck building, and also the mechanics, right? Because like they could create totally different cards based on those different mechanics, right? In Hearthstone, they're never going to create a card that you can use on your opponent's turn. I mean, maybe they will, but it's not something
we doubt
really...
that. Yeah. It would go against like the entire code of the game as it's built right now.
Right. Yeah. But Magic, that's integral to the game and the mechanics of the game. So you're going to see a lot more things like that, like instant spells and things like that that are kind of made to be used in response on your opponent's turn. So I guess I just wanted to kind of do a bit of a deep dive into this idea and kind of talk about the ways that these differences of being able to target where you want attacks, or just as a general, hey, I'm attacking, and then your opponent has a response. How do you think that that really changes things on like a fundamental level, or changes strategies of decks or how things are played for the game?
It's a very broad like topic that we can dive into. Just each game has to decide for themselves first off how they even want the mechanics to be structured before they get into like printing the cards and all these other things, because you have to be very aware of how that's going to impact the overall gameplay. And there's interesting nuance and like different strategies you can go with on different types of card games as well, when it comes to whether or not there can be targeted attacks, or it's like declare attackers and then declare blockers and so on. I think if I had to say that there was one that had like more strategic elements to it, I would say it's probably like the declaring attackers and blockers, because it requires you to sometimes like I don't know, live on a razor's edge for when do I attack with this creature because I might need to hold it back to block and so on. But if I don't attack with it, then I miss some of the pressure, and then I can't set up for my own win condition or something. In a game where you have targeted things, well, there are no blockers, which is why, keywords in Hearthstone, for instance, like taunt exists. So you do have a way to have some defense, or other keywords like lifesteal exists. So you have a way to regain some health with an attack because you can't really have your creatures protect you unless, they're, as previously stated, like taunt minions. So when it comes to the actual like attacking stage, at least in games like Hearthstone and other games where there's targeting, as long as there's no downside for targeting, it really simplifies the whole process. Well, just hear all these things. Let me go get them, hit them in the face, get them. And occasionally you might need to clear up your opponent's side of the board. Often that's done through a way that you just try to make it most advantageous to you, like a value trade, for instance, where if your opponent has 3 power and 3 health, your creature, for instance, and then your opponent's creature has like 2 power and 3 health. Oh, well, that'd be a great option for me to go ahead and clear that up because my creature will survive, theirs will die, and I'll still have a creature that can keep attacking later, and kind of extract more value from its stats. Magic and other games, I believe they don't lose the health, right? Once they win a fight, it's not like a constant thing where like on the next turn they'd have the same amount of stats.
It depends on the game. So Magic, basically at the end of each turn, all the damage goes away and they're reset back to their normal. Legends of Runeterra, the things on the board actually do keep their damage. Very much like Hearthstone. So it's
so even more nuance within that too when it comes to like the interactions in the game. And each game designer, at some point had to decide, do we want to have targeted attacks or not? Do we want to have like this declaration of attacks? Do we want to have things recover their stats after taking damage once the turn is over, or retain that as like, I don't know, they're wounded now and they're not recovering? To me, it was always weird when I played Magic years and years ago. And like I could send an attack into this creature, right? The creature almost died, but then it didn't. And now it's just as difficult as before to kill it. I'm like, what? It's like it's just shrugged it off. That was nothing. Like, I don't know. I do prefer, I think, the ongoing, like you retained the damage that you took type of thing from just resetting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably do. And it's definitely something that as more card games have come out, I think has kind of become, I don't necessarily want to say the standard, but I would say kind of the more common way of going about it is that things do usually keep the damage into the next turn. We're seeing that with like Disney Lorcana now. Like I said, Runeterra. So it's kind of interesting there. And it's, the way that you were talking about this really made me think kind of in a way, I think at the most basic level, I'll say, like the kind of what it boils down to is in games where you get to decide if you are targeting your attack into your opponent's stuff or like their face or base or whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? The onus, the kind of pressure, the decisions are more on you, right? But in things like Magic or even Runeterra a bit, it seems like the kind of decision, the lead, the advantage is a little bit more on the opponent, right? Because they're the ones that get to decide how things are getting traded or blocked, so they can make blocks and stuff that are going to be more advantageous for them.
Right.
Whereas when you are doing, the attacks or targeting face or whatever, you kind of get to decide that. If you get to attack into their things, as you said, you can make, multiple trades into their minions, their things on the board. And it's kind of up to you which things you're going to kill off on their side. So you can kind of target and kill off, their more impactful minions. They're more like scary things, right? Like, I need to kill that. I need to get rid of that thing on the board. So it's kind of up to you. But on the other side, if they get to block and do that, then all of those decisions are kind of up to them. So it's kind of interesting.
Creates a different level of strategy there as well, where if you have less control over how you want your attacks to go, then you have to try to set up a scenario in which case all of your attacks will be advantageous. So it doesn't matter how they choose to block or not block, it will never help them. They can only like stem the bleeding a little bit, so I don't know. I think in a way that creates maybe some longer games or different interaction with how you need to approach your plan to win the game. And that's something that I can really see how it developed, especially in a game like Magic, which started a long time ago and has been a physical card game, the trendsetter for all these things too. So they're kind of the ones exploring new territory and establishing all these different rules that people maybe either like or don't like. And then other games kind of build off of that and deviate as they see fit for, well, hey, I liked this, but I didn't like that. And in a digital game like Hearthstone, for instance, they generally would want the games to go a little bit faster. So, hey, you have more agency when it comes to how you want to have your attacks go when it's your turn and you get to be the one attacking, rather than your opponent sort of dictating how this is going to go so they can set up the best way for them.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that, I guess, timeline or like chronological progression if you look at like when games were released and kind of what games came before them. Because I think, as you said, like Magic was kind of the first card game that really started all of this, right? And I would say Hearthstone is probably arguably the most influential like digital game. Hearthstone's probably the game that really kind of created the digital era of card games. Even though there was like Magic Online that did really, predate Hearthstone, but it wasn't as popular. It was very niche. Hearthstone, as we've talked about, I think before on this show and other topics, right? Hearthstone kind of was the first accessible digital card game that was more targeted for a bigger audience, right? So more people kind of got into card games, more people found this than they would Magic. And then you had kind of after all that, then you had things like Legends of Runeterra that came out and kind of mixed both of those things, right? So it kind of took the blocking mechanism and stuff from Magic, but it took things like the gaining 1 mana every turn and putting that from Hearthstone into kind of their version of the game. So it kind of, as more games have come out, it's like taking all these little pieces from the different games and using it in their game. And then putting their own spin on it, right? As we've talked about, like,
you gotta sound different.
Yeah,
doing
with
similar things to other
wordings,
games, but different words.
Yeah.
Pick and choosing mechanics that you like or don't like. I mean, I think Lorcana's done a pretty good job of it from what I've seen so far when it comes to like how they wanted to approach designing the game and which mechanics they liked from other games that they're using in theirs and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting too, I would say, even though, looking at like this aspect again, right? I said in Lorcana, you quest to gain lore, but the one kind of big mechanic that feels a bit different from other games is, right, in most of these card games, you're trying to bring your opponent's health or whatever down from a certain point to zero. Whereas Disney Lorcana is kind of the opposite. You start at zero lore and you are gaining lore, and then the first person to get to 20 wins. So it's kind of, instead of like, oh, I'm damaging my opponent or I'm doing, that against them, it's like you're working for your own goal.
Right.
So it's
Just
kind
a
of
clever way
interesting.
to spin it. Essentially, you
Yeah.
could say that the minion or creature is still dealing damage, and that damage would be reducing the opponent's life total from 20 to lower and lower, but instead it's just saying that you're increasing your own. Like, it's a clever way to Disneyfy
Yeah.
it, right? And just to be like,
Yes.
no, we're not hurting each other here, nobody's
Exactly.
dying.
Yes. But I think it is interesting to look at, because all of these mechanics, as we talked about, right? They change kind of the way people play or cards that
Mhm.
are created. So if you look at certain mechanics, um, even in some of the card games, like when you have games like Magic or Legends of Runeterra that have blockers, right? You declare blockers. You also then have mechanics that are added in, things like elusive in Legends of
Mhm.
Runeterra, right? Or flying in Magic. And then you have, uh, well, Legends of Runeterra, then it's like, okay, evasive or elusive, you can only have, other creatures, other things that have elusive, can trade or target those. In Magic, right? You have flying, and then creatures that have reach or flying can then defend or attack
Right.
into other flying creatures, right? So it kind of adds another level of like mechanics and keywords and design aspect, like from the actual design space. Whereas you don't really need that. Like, what would be the purpose of something like that in something like Hearthstone, right? Not really. You have
Uh,
taunt,
at
I
at
guess, would be kind
most
of
at most you'd probably have something that could ignore taunt, which is
right.
in and of itself an actual mechanic that has been printed in
Yeah.
Hearthstone.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I've only seen it on one card, and that was Kane, the Demon Hunter card, which is
Yeah.
a favorite of mine. I love that card. The face plays taunt, me still go face. It's just fantastic.
Exactly.
But like it's just cool that there's within whatever mechanic you choose to go with, um you then enable yourself, kind of, I guess, the design space to work with. How do we want to allow additional strategies to interact with this mechanic that we've chosen? So even something like Hearthstone with targeting, there's an example with Kane of one of the ways that you can bypass something. Um, when it comes to declaring attackers and blockers, there should often at least be some kind of downside to, like, declaring an attack, and mainly that is like the creature itself has to tap, so then it can't block on your side. So you have to determine, hey, when is it okay for me to do this and when is it not okay? And that also enables different things to be printed, like this minion doesn't, or this creature doesn't tap when attacking, so it's able to attack and block at the same time, like as a special ability. Maybe you have to pay more, use more resources for, whatever the case may be. And nuances just kind of continue to spill out from there, and that's what we all love so much about card games. You have your basic rules, you have your mechanics for how the game works, and now let's break them. Now let's break
Yeah,
them and let's play
pretty
around with them
much.
and find a way to cheat the
Yeah.
mechanics of the game so we can
Yeah.
win. Right? That seems to be the goal of every card game player. At the heart of it is, I'm going to break the meta. I'm going to break the game, so that I can do something really powerful and cruise to victories.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also pretty interesting because then once you start getting, I would say even like again the kind of era of digital card games and all of the technology that we have now, right? Information is so easy to access, and you can get deck lists and strategies like immediately, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of also shaped the way that ultimately all of these mechanics and the deck strategies then start to turn into and like change the meta overall of a game, right? So if people are trying to break these mechanics and say, oh, okay, well, uh, let's say in Magic, hey, I'm just going to build a deck with all flying creatures because then if my opponent doesn't have flying or reach, I just get to attack and they can't do anything about it. And I'm sending all this damage,
Yep.
to them
Good
because they
luck
can't
blocking
block.
this.
And then if that strategy becomes popular, then people say, oh, okay, so people are just playing a bunch of flying. So then I'm going to play flying and reach, or they come up with mechanics or ways to kind of interact with that, right? And then it just keeps developing and changing from there. And you see that in every game, right? That's kind of how all of the metas and all of the things develop. But I think ultimately that you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that basically that's how it all starts is people saying, okay, here's the mechanics, here's how these work, here's
Right.
this specific keyword or this specific mechanic of a card, I'm gonna break it.
Yep.
And then everybody else has to go, how do we play against that breaking thing? Right? So then it changes. And
Yeah.
um it's also
I'm
kind of
gonna.
interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, looking at like the difference of how certain games also take into account like the end of your deck, right? Because in some
True.
some
Yes.
games they say, oh, once you can't draw a card anymore from your deck, you just lose. But then some games turn it into fatigue damage. And even in that, like fatigue damage is different across all of the different games. But that kind of adds to different strategies and interactions, right? Because in some games, I would say mill type decks where you just want your opponent to draw through their deck and then end the game. In some games, I think mill strategies are much more prevalent than in other games. And I think that speaks to the way that the game ends based on the end of the deck. So
Absolutely.
it's so interesting, like looking at all these different mechanics and like how can you interact with what they're doing on the other side of the board or not, or who's kind of in control of the overall decisions during a turn changes the way that people build their deck or the strategies that they try.
Yep. Figure out what's your win condition with the game itself, and then figure out your approach to how you want to win that game. Um, in the example of like attackers versus blockers, someone might have the idea, oh well, I'll run a bunch of flying creatures. Like I have a very fast deck full of mosquitoes. I don't know, and they can all fly, so you can't block them. Good luck. And that is now prevalent. Well, now there's a new deck that has risen, and it's a deck full of spiders, and they're blocking and killing the mosquitoes, but the spiders are going to lose to like some other bigger land-based creature that then stomps all over the spiders. I have a deck full of dinosaurs. Good luck with your spiders, and then it just keeps going from there. So often what happens is counters develop to a particular popular strategy. No matter what strategy it might be, there usually is something that will be good against it or counters the concept of what that deck is doing. If there's a deck that wants to mill you and make you draw everything so that you just have too many things and you can't play them all, well, it's probably going to lose to the deck that always runs out of cards in their hand because they're spending them all really fast because they're really aggressive and they're just running you over. The last thing you want to do as a mill deck is give use your central strategy, which is giving your opponent cards when all they want is more cards so they can beat you faster. And then on the flip side of things, like that aggressive deck is probably losing to a deck that's really slow and careful and is clearing every board and is very deliberate, has more expensive things. But when that deck runs into the mill deck, oh god, what do I do? My whole deck is burning away. All of these cards do nothing for me. So, there's always like one way or another to play. And as we talked about in the term, solitaire decks rise up a lot of times to combat popular like control strategies. So at first you have maybe some aggressive things that are dominating a format, and then there's some control strategies that beat the aggressive decks, and then there's combo, typically is often what it's referred to, and a lot of people call combo like solitaire because combo ignores most other mechanics of the game in favor of a specific thing that sometimes literally says do this and win the game, and other times it's just a sequence of things that assembles to a combination where you get all of the damage or all of the whatever it is you need to win at the same time in an unstoppable burst.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you, I think, and I'm pretty sure that we talked briefly about this before we started recording, but I would like to hear your thoughts on, do you think that the impact of getting to choose where you are sending your attacks versus not being able to, so games that, your opponent can declare blockers, do you think that ultimately impacts the amount of kind of quote unquote solitaire decks that are prevalent in a game?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure exactly how to assess it because I think there's too many other things going on with the background, like designs and other different elements of the game itself. So, for instance, like Magic has a way to interrupt and interact with your opponent on their turn. That's a game that has declared blockers and no targeting, but I wouldn't call declared blockers and no targeting the influencer here in preventing like a solitaire style. The influencer in preventing the solitaire style in that case is like being able to act while your opponent is doing things. For other games, I mean, I do think maybe like it leans a little bit more towards if you control your targeting, then the solitaire deck, the rise of solitaire decks is more likely to happen just in a vacuum. But I don't know if that's a big enough determining factor to say that like that would just always be the case for one versus the other.
Totally fair. Yeah. I think it's kind of a stepping stone, but as you said, there's a lot of other factors that play in. And I think this is also where you kind of have mechanics and keywords that come into play that make a difference. When you have more keywords or mechanics in a game that can challenge that, like in terms of design, right? You want space for every type of deck, right? You want space for multiple deck types to be available. There are people who love mill style decks, who love combo style and OTK decks that, just work towards their own game plan. But there's also people that don't like those style of decks or don't like playing against those style of decks. So it's kind of interesting to see how like the mechanics and keywords of a game kind of come in sometimes and change that, prevent it a little bit. And then maybe, add like a rotation, let's say for standard, when cards go into wild, that can kind of impact. And then you might see a little bit of a rise of those cards, or type of deck again. And it's because the change in the mechanics and sometimes in Hearthstone, even like the addition of like tech cards, right? Kind
Mhm.
of also can change things, right? Things like Lotheb type effects where you play that and your opponent's stuff costs more on the next turn. We've seen kind of that over time kind of come and go, right? Those kind of challenge some of those OTK decks. Hey, your opponent wants to play out some spell damage stuff and then hit you with a bunch of spells. Well, I'm going to play this thing that makes all of their spells cost 2 more for their next
Right.
turn and kind of slow that down. So it kind of creates this like loop, I would say, of not only the choice of, hey, I get to target where my attacks are going, or I can build a deck and I have a strategy of just playing all these things from my hand, but then there's specific cards or specific keywords and things that developly, that's not a word, developmentally, the devs and creators of the game make those, keywords or specific cards that counter that. So it's not necessarily just that like, oh, you get to target, so then that strategy can run wild or not, because then there's things that are kind of weaved in
Right.
throughout that challenge those. So it's, I don't know, it's just interesting. I don't know. I think I was thinking about this as I was falling asleep last night. I'm like, some games you get to like target where you're attacking or not, and your opponent really can't do much about it. But then in some games, you just kind of say, I want this thing, and then your opponent says, no, or not. So I don't know. I was thinking about it last night in bed, and I just thought this is kind of really an interesting topic and to kind of dive into and talk about how games and how the mechanics of a game, or even how the devs of a game will think about creating cards based on those basics of the game, is just actually like so deep. It's very
Yeah.
interesting.
And you also brought up an interesting element that could probably even be its own topic, which is tech cards. Um, and tech cards just being any wide range of things that just like, hey, this card on its own is probably just like bad or not something that you would ever consider putting into your deck because um there are better options for the cost or the stats or any number of other reasons for why it's included, but has a specific relevance based on what is popular that other people are running in their decks. It's an answer to, I guess, the question that might be asked by a certain powerful card. And that can have a wide range of things from like, hey, this makes spells cost more, this pulls a minion from the opponent's hand, this makes them discard something, this destroys something in the deck. There's all kinds of different ways that it can happen, but mainly the concept of it is disruption. It is preventing whatever your opponent's prevailing strategy is from working. If weapons are everywhere in a meta like Hearthstone, there is weapon destruction. If there is a combo meta that is running rampant, there is a dirty rat, as the card itself is called, which will summon a random minion from your opponent's hand onto the battlefield. And that could potentially be good or bad for you. But if you have additional answers to immediately remove that minion, or the minion, its primary purpose was that it had to be played already from hand, it's already been neutralized. So there's lots of different things like that that come into play. And I do like the existence of tech cards because there grants some agency that should be there when it comes to like certain unstoppable strategies or feeling unstoppable. Um, Sometimes they get a little over the top if maybe they print too much or the tech card itself is too good in a vacuum. Um, but it does kind of speak to my favorite type of gameplay, which is flexibility. And I love when an archetype or a way of playing is not confined to just that way. Like if you're playing an aggressive deck, maybe you're not always the aggressor. You have some options to pivot to a different game plan and play slower, remove things. Now you're starting to control the game. On the flip side, your combo deck that needs to assemble all of its pieces and win in one turn, maybe can win a different way by playing really aggressively or something in a situation. Or a control deck all of a sudden starts playing really aggressively because it recognizes the matchup and has the ability to do so with the type of build that it has. That's where things get really cool in card games, and I really like them. Is, hey, we can flex things for not just one way.
I typically call those like secondary win conditions, when you can kind of change up how you play, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
You look at a deck and you're like, oh, okay, this deck wins by killing my opponent with multiple spells over the top to their face. But you can also play minions and hit them in the face over a couple of turns and win that way.
Yeah.
So
sometimes the little support guy that drew you some cards to get to your combo is also the little support guy that could, and winds up pushing 5 or 8 damage to the face or something, and that's just enough that you needed to win the game. And those kinds of things are pretty cool when they happen in card games to me.
Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like maybe that is kind of a little bit easier to make work in games where you are the one kind of making those decisions, right? Of where you get to target your attacks and stuff. I kind of feel like that allows for a little bit more room like that. And I would also say, I think in a game where your opponent doesn't get to interact on your turn, that's kind of where those tech cards fill that role in those games, right? Whereas, you're still playing it on your turn, but it's kind of interacting with your opponent's next turn, right? Like in Hearthstone, the card will say, next turn on your opponent's turn, their spells cost 2 more, whatever. So it's still in a way interacting on your opponent's turn without actually interacting on their turn directly.
I mean, you still sit there until they click the end turn, but
Yeah, exactly. So it's again just another example of how the kind of mechanics or the card design is influenced by the base mechanics of the game. And it's like, okay, kind of there we go. There's another example of that. I don't know. I don't think that I realized how nuanced and how deep that we could get with this discussion when I first thought of this topic idea.
Yeah.
And I feel like we do this every
ways,
time. Yeah, every time though. We're like, okay, we could talk about this. And then we talk and we're like, oh, but this thing, oh, but then, well, we start making these little connections. And I honestly don't think that if I didn't have as much experience across multiple card games, I don't think that I would recognize it quite as much. If I really only played one card game, or that was all I knew, and I'd never even heard of other card games or looked into what they do or heard about them or anything, it's not something I would even think about, right? Because I just play the one game, and that's the game I know. That's how card games are, right? It's just in your little field of view. That's it. But it's kind of interesting to talk about this and look at the different mechanics and different ways that things change based on kind of those one or two decisions.
And everyone's going to have a preference too on which one they prefer. For instance, for me, I far prefer the targeting. I want to be in control of where the attacks go at all times. I don't want to have my opponent dictate, how they answer that. Even though it can create to a lot of, or can set up for a lot of creative maneuvering and ways to figure out how to find the advantage, and there's strategy and there's fun in that. To me, maybe it's just a more simplistic way of approaching it. Although again, there's different strategy too in targeting for how you target, and that creates its own level of nuance too, which is cool. But I think I'm always going to prefer the targeting, but it's not to say that one thing is ever better than the other, because there's just so many different ways that you can go, and it's one of the things we love the most about all these different card games. And also maybe the primary reason Dragon Rider's always playing as many card games as possible. Like, show me more mechanics, show me new things. I've got to discover more. And that's awesome.
That's right.
Something to celebrate.
And, speaking on that, we didn't even talk about games that use lanes as a mechanic either.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's
or auto
battlers
at all, that's a whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, even in some card games, right, they use lanes, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, attacks might be automatic to your opponent's face, but then if there's an opposing creature or opposing thing in that lane, then that's when you have the block. So it's kind of like declaring blockers, but it's a little bit different still, and that's a whole nother thing. And it's like, I don't know, I love the different aspects, and how it's like you can kind of see the cascade effect just by saying, hey, are we allowing targeting attack or not? Right? Like,
this is all building
great
your knowledge for developing a brand new game in like 20 years. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh my God. This is something that I have thought about for the last several.
I know.
Should I need to just make my own card game? Like, should I? But that's, yeah, we don't need to get into that.
Not yet.
Oh gosh, no. But I think that was a really, really good discussion, Ron. Thank you for joining me in that, and
my pleasure.
Talking about the differences, because like I said, I think that got even deeper than I expected it to. So I love it. Do you have any other final thoughts or closing thoughts on that topic before we kind of close out?
Remember to go face.
That's right. Go face. Go for the lore. Quest away.
That's right.
It's the best strategy. All right. Well, we just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us this week, for joining us each and every week as always. But let's kind of talk about where you can reach out to us in case maybe you want to join on the show, or you would like to have us interview somebody specifically that you can reach out to us at TCCG Roundtable at protonmail.com. You can check us out on Twitter at TCCG Roundtable. And even on Twitter there, our top pinned tweet, you can find the link to join in our Discord. We have some discussions on there, share some news and some links, different stuff going on in there. So we'd love to have more people interacting in that Discord channel. If you want to check out the video version of our show, you can find that on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/dragonriderTCCG. And you can find the show wherever you listen to audio podcasts as well. We are a little bit backlogged. I apologize. I'm working on that and getting that updated and caught up. But that will be caught up very soon, hopefully. But you can check out the show on your audio catchers as well. And, if you want some physical swag, things like playmats, dice, maybe deck boxes, even customized stuff, you can get all of that through Inked Gaming, which is affiliated with the show. And if you use our link, then you actually help directly support us as well. So definitely would appreciate that. Or if you want to get a monthly box that they send you, some different card game stuff, I have definitely looked into that. And as soon as I'm able and have a little bit, more disposable income, I definitely want to get one of those because this is super cool. It's just like, send me stuff every month. Send me card game stuff. But outside of that, Ron, where can people find you if they want to check more out from you?
So you can find me on YouTube at RonMexico HS. You can find me on Twitter at Ron_HS. And you can find me streaming on Twitch every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern at RonMexico HS. What about for you individually, Dragon Rider? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, DawnieDK, DAWNIEDK. Check me out on both Twitch and YouTube, but for now, kind of more YouTube, both at dragonrider TCCG. And you can also hear me talking all about standard Hearthstone each week over at the Dr. 3HS podcast. And, I think that is going to wrap it up for us this week. Thank you, Ron, and thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. And we will see you at the roundtable.